So a little bit about me. As Danielle mentioned, my name is Mary Krowski. She got it right. Don't expect anybody else to
First and
remember
last.
that one. I own Bravo Dog Training. I've been training for about 20 years. I work mainly with behavior cases, aggression, fear, reactivity, anxiety, lots of different things like that, although I've done a variety of things over the years. I also have some background in rescue, shelters, and vet clinics, as I've come to be the trainer that I am today. Body language is basically, we're just looking at the nonverbal signals that dogs are giving us, all right? With dogs, that's really the bulk of what they're giving us. We spend an awful lot of our time talking and not so much of everything else. Dogs are mostly about body language. When two dogs meet each other, they don't walk up and say woof, 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 and have a little conversation. They walk up and they move slightly to one side or the other side, and that's how they have their conversation. So learning about body language is pretty important from that perspective. One thing that I want everybody to kind of think about as we're going through this, and maybe you thought about it to get you here, but a lot of us kind of have this idea that we do know what a dog is telling us. I doubt there's anybody in this room that wouldn't look at this dog and go, oh, it's so scared. But what is important to us here is that we want to look for smaller signals. Smaller signals are what's going to be really important in really understanding the big picture. So I have this picture as an example. The picture we just looked at, pretty obvious. This one, maybe not so much. And there's a reason you can't see it very well. Partly it's the picture. So there's a Doberman who's standing next to a fence there. And he, I believe it was a male, but I'm not entirely sure. I didn't go up and find out. He is standing at the edge of a children's park, okay? This was up in Washington Park, and there were probably about 50 kids playing in this park. So this dog isn't giving nearly as much, but he's giving enough if you know what to look for. This dog, not long, well, I actually took the picture afterwards, but a child walked up near the fence and this dog was tethered. Its owners were somewhere around. You can kind of see there's a stroller in the background. This dog did a full-on snarl and lunged and snapped at a child that walked near the fence. So what I'm hoping you guys will be able to recognize by the end of this are the smaller things that let us know what's going on with this dog. One of the biggest things I would say is that the park is behind him. All right, so it's behind me where I'm standing taking this picture. So if you're standing there tied to a fence for say half an hour, and there's a circus over here and an empty field over there, what are you gonna look at? Probably the circus, right? It's a little more interesting. He's standing facing opposite of the park for a reason, all right? He's turned away from everybody saying, I don't wanna be here. I'd rather be somewhere else. I'm gonna kind of la 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 pretend that they're not all here. But when a kid gets so close that that's not an option anymore, he said, okay, I really mean it, go away from me, okay? There's a reason he's hard to see. He's kind of trying to, he had quite a bit of leash. He was, I think, trying to become one with the fence and disappear a little bit. So I mentioned a few things here as to why it's important to look at body language. The earlier we can identify what behavior is going on with the dog, the less chance of a bite, the better chance of identifying what's really truly going on. We don't want to have to wait for the dog to make it so soon. They can help eliminate anthropomorphism. So rather than either us or an owner looking at the dog and saying, oh, you know, isn't he this or that really isn't a characteristic that dogs do. The more we learn about body language, the more we can understand them for their own point of view. I find the more that we understand about body language, the less likely we are to attribute things falsely to dominance. There are some things that accurately a dog is trying to be more dominant over another dog or some kind of situation like that, or is acting more submissively. But the way we've built up training up until now, well, up until the last 10, 15 years, is we're slowly catching up. We used to kind of just say, well, he's jumping up on you, he's trying to be dominant, he's doing this, he's trying to be dominant. Everything a poor dog did was about dominance. The more we can understand about what their body language is telling us, the more accurately we can attribute what they're doing, okay? And in fairness in communication, dogs learn a limited amount of our language. We can learn even more about theirs, hopefully. And like I said, the more likely that if we look and acknowledge these little things that a dog does, they're more likely to repeat them. If a dog tries offering us signals and tries offering us signals, and we always ignore them, or we always get them wrong, and we always shut them down, some dogs stop offering them. And that's not fair to them, and it ends up then being frustrating for owners or for whoever's trying to work with the dog, because all of a sudden this dog doesn't signal the way that they used to. So the first thing I want you guys to think of when you're looking at body language and behavior is that it's not that a dog is aggressive or that a dog is afraid. There's not a particular point that you can pick that out. That would be kind of like looking at this picture and saying, okay, where does it turn green? Or where does it turn blue? There's no exact moment, all right? Something that I try to tell owners a lot of times is, they'll talk about their dog reacting to somebody or kind of exploding. And I like to remind them, gee, if you were walking down an alley and there was some creepy looking dude walking down the other side of the alley, the moment you decided to scream was not the moment you became afraid, okay? There's so much more going on before that. You might not be able to identify that moment, and it's the same for dogs, okay? The moment that they explode is not the moment that they're becoming aggressive, reactive, fearful, or whatever. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the next thing when we're looking at body language is I want everybody to do their best to focus on objective observations versus subjective observations. So take a look at this dog here, and then I want you to look at objective. We can say things like his head is hanging low. He's looking down, maybe kind of away from whoever's taking the picture. His ears are kind of hanging low versus being maybe a little bit more up and alert. His tail might be tucked, okay? We can't see it, but that's a possibility. And his paw is a little bit raised. Subjective observations of that would be things like saying, oh, well, that dog is scared. That dog is sad, lonely, worried, guilty, any of those types of things. And those don't help us identify what's going on with the dog. Unless we're inside that dog's head, we don't know for sure. Is it scared? Is it worried? Is it frightened? What's going on in there? But we can take an objective look and look at all these other things, and that can help us put those things together. Okay? All right. Next thing is that we have to observe everything within context. So when people are learning about body language, one of the first things that often comes up as a question or a confusion is, well, gee, you talked about yawning, but my dog looks really exhausted, and my dog yawned. Does that mean this, this, and this? No, probably not. Context is important. Almost everything that we're going to talk about, I can't think of anything we're going to talk about today that couldn't be something else, okay? So what we have to do is look at what's going on in order to figure out, does this make sense? It's another reason that pictures aren't ideal, unless we know a backstory to them. So think about, even with people who don't use nearly as much of the nonverbal communication, how many different things a raised arm can mean, okay? This lady, she's probably looking for somebody that she's met, something like that. A raised arm could be, just think of even driving in a car, okay? It could be, hey neighbor, good to see you. It could mean, go ahead, you got to this stop sign first, go through. A wave can mean a lot of different things depending on the context, okay? Even something that seems as universal as like flipping somebody off, We do it to our friends sometimes. Does that mean we really hate them? Probably not. So context is really important, especially for dogs where they can't say, oh yeah, I was joking, or yeah, you know what, I had something caught behind my ear. It'll freak out. So context is important, okay? All right, so the next thing that we're looking at in just kind of general observation skills is that we want to look at these cues and not just look at any individual cue and say, oh, I saw something, but try to look at repetition of cues, okay? So how many times a given cue is shown. If I see 5 cues from a dog in 5 minutes, that's probably going to tell me more than if I just saw 1, okay? The frequency, how often it's shown, and then a combination, what other cues are shown at the same time. So a dog that yawns that also gives me 6 other cues tells me a lot more likely that, you know, this is going on versus that is going on, okay? So when we look at observing by describing the behavior rather than trying to say, oh, he's scared, I think it's more useful to go through by body parts. If you look at some of the resources that are out there for body language, there are kind of 2 different approaches. One is that you can look at what the eyes of the dog say, what the head says, what the tail says. The other is you'll see some list by this dog is scared, this dog is being aggressive, this dog is being dominant. And that, to me, unless you're kind of just reviewing and saying, oh gee, you know, these types of things tend to fall into playful. I think it makes more sense to look at them in the context of what you would observe. Okay, so that's how we're going to go through them today. So we're going to start out with eyes. There are a variety of ways. We're going to go through some of these with additional slides. But there are different things that eyes can tell us. Eyes can be pretty tricky. I think we can often see more from where the eyes are looking and what's going on that way than the eyes themselves, but there are some things specific to the eyes. So a dog can often have either what we would consider to be soft eyes or hard eyes. Sometimes you can just tell by everything else that's going on with the dog which they've got going on. In general, a soft eye is going to be a little bit more almond-shaped, and they're going to have more relaxed brows, versus a hard eye is going to be a little bit rounder, and you're going to see tighter muscles around the eyes, okay? Long, slow blinking tends to be a little bit more relaxed. You can also see squinty eyes. We're going to talk a little bit about lookaways, whale eyes, the dilation of the eyes, focus and fixation, and the hypervigilance. So the slow blinks and the squinty eyes. I think this is kind of a golden retriever, like, look at stand long for the squinty eyes. they kind of do this one a lot. Slow blinks can be from a dog that's relaxed and chilling out. It can also be from a dog that's saying, I'd really like everybody else to chill out. I'm not too keen on the way things are going, okay? This picture, this dog is probably soliciting attention. There can also be, you know, you can also see it in dogs that are more stressed. You'll probably see some in some of these other pictures as well. So lookaways. If a dog is kind of like with the Doberman that I talked about, is looking the other direction of whatever its trigger is, whatever the action is in the room, that says something about what's going on with the dog, okay? It can be deflective, it can be calming, it can be avoidance. It can be a, hey, I don't want to fight with you, I'm just going to be looking over here and just calm things down. That said, don't necessarily treat a dog that's looking away as a dog that's safe. Because any dog that's going, hey, you know what, this is a bit much, can change really quickly, okay? So whale eye is something that you can see on dogs. It's caused by the dog's head facing one direction and their eyes facing the other direction, okay? I think a lot of times kind of the dilation and everything else that's going on with the dogs contribute to this that make it easier to see. But it's where you can see that kind of moon shape of the white of the dog's eye. Okay? This is going to be stress, fear, anxiety. This tends to be a give space kind of a cue. If I were looking at a dog that had that kind of an eye, looking at what can I change, what can I do to take this dog further away from what's going on, move myself back, whatever's going on. So dilation, and this is a big one that it would be considered out of context. Okay, so if you're in a room with really light, kind of like in here, and we have a dog that's eyes are really dilated, well, probably everybody else's eyes are dilated in the room too. But if you're in a brighter environment and the dog's eyes are really dilated, that can be a body language sign. Okay, that can be a sign of stress. It can also be over-arousal. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that the dog is about to panic, but it's probably a sign of something. Dilation, along with some of the other things that we'll look at, can also be a medical concern. Okay, so if you're seeing it repeatedly and things aren't matching up or things like that, there can be medical reasons for some of these things too. So yet another reason to be looking in context, looking at combinations of cues, all those things, it has to all be put together. Okay, we can't just look at a dog and say, gosh, your eyes are always dilated. What, you must be this. Well, you could have a medical problem too, okay? All right. You'll start to see a theme as we go from body part to body part of if we see any kind of stillness, if there's movement that stops. So if I'm looking around the room and suddenly I fixate, you're probably going to get a little uncomfortable, okay? Any ceasing of movement, okay, and a fixation and staring can fall into that category too, right? Eyes moving, eyes stopped, is a bit of a red flag, okay? It can be precipitous to a bite. If I'm working with a dog and they're a little uncomfortable and suddenly they stop, I'm going to really, really, really evaluate my next move. It does not mean that the dog is going to bite, but it's a decent warning sign, okay? You can sometimes see this with guarding of items, so it may be a focus or a fixation on whoever is causing them trouble. It may be on another dog, or if they're guarding an item or something like that, the fixation may be directed towards what they're guarding. So it may not be directed towards whoever's approaching, if it's that kind of a situation. But if there's a fixation there, it's something to be aware of. So hypervigilance is a little bit hard to show with a still image, but hypervigilance basically refers to, rather than, let's say, a dog out for a walk and it's kind of checking things out as it walks down the street and maybe sniffing here and there, this is referring to there's something that might be over everywhere, and they're kind of checking everything, maybe repeatedly, probably not staying too long on any one particular thing. You're likely to see it in a new or changed environment, although it can come up in an existing environment with stress. So it's different than just looking around. In that kind of a case with a dog, I'd be looking at, okay, gee, I'm out for a walk and they can't focus and they can't settle. Can we just stay in one spot for a few minutes? For some dogs, that's enough to bring things down and they can get a grip again, okay? Or if you're out for a walk and you're approaching a street fair and going, I'm gonna take the dog to the farmer's market or something today, and the closer you get, the more is going on. It might be a sign that I'm gonna walk the dog near the farmer's market today, and now we're gonna go home. We don't wanna go all the way. We're gonna give some more space, okay? So ears. Ears are one that can be a little bit tricky from breed to breed. Different breeds hold their ears differently. They've been bred to have different shapes of ears. There's a lot that goes on differently with ears based on breed. So knowing the individual dog that you're looking at can have something to do with that. But even with dogs with real rose-shaped ears, things like that, you can often, if you're looking close enough, tell the difference. Okay, they can still move that interior ear, which will change the shape of what's going on outside. So in general, a relaxed and more floppy ear is going to be a more relaxed dog. A pinned back ear can be fearful. Some dogs kind of pin back when they're anxious or really aroused. Some dogs just kind of pin back when stuff is going on. Forward can be alert and listening. It can also mean that things are just kind of moving forward in that direction and they're feeling more confident. So there are a lot of things to consider with ears. There's only so many ways a dog can move their ears. They can also change direction based on listening. Okay, so a dog that is maybe looking at what's going on over here and then hears something back there, they may flip their ears back and pin them backwards or change the direction just because they're focused on something else. So mouth. Big variety of things that can go on with the mouth. Some of them are really, really specific, and some of them take a lot of experience to know the particular differences with. Excuse me, we're going to go through a variety of them today. If you're feeling like you're still really not understanding mouth stuff very well, or you want to learn more about what they're doing with their mouths, I would encourage you to go and educate yourself with a lot of video. Mouths can change in the littlest bit and go from one thing to another. And the difference particularly when we look at things like the long lip or the tight short lip, that can be really hard to pick up on in the dog, okay? So I don't get into it in excruciating detail here because I don't want anybody walking out here going, oh yeah, well this, that. It takes a lot to get it. Be aware that there are differences, but it takes a lot of looking to really fine tune and get that. Open versus closed. There's some body language stuff out there that will say, oh gee, a dog with an open mouth this or a dog with a closed mouth that. Really, it can go either way. It depends a lot on circumstance and what's going on with the dog, the temperature in the room, a lot of things. So looking at what's going on around them, one thing that we can look at is that a change is to be noted, okay? So I say mouth open to then closed. That can be one to watch out for. So a dog that's been kind of had the mouth partway open and then suddenly shuts it, that's again, that can be more of a stilling kind of a behavior. We can also see mouth go closed to open if a dog starts panting, so that can indicate an increase in stress too. Snarling, snapping, biting, all movements of the mouth. I think most people are probably familiar with it. Snarling can be just the teeniest little bit of a lip raise to a really nice, obvious, hit you in the face kind of one like this little dachshund is doing. Any of these, take seriously, okay? There are some people that will say, oh, well, you know, the dog tried to bite me, but this or that, but I pulled away, or this or that. If a dog intends to bite you, then unless there's something physical preventing them, they're going to bite you. These are all big warnings. We hopefully can see a lot of stuff before this, but looking at something like this, I had someone contact me the other day with like a Akita, something else, big mix, and say, well, you know, my dog has been nibbling at people and yeah, we might want to take that a little more seriously, okay? For a lot of people, the difference between a nip and a bite is how big the dog is, right? A Chihuahua, it's a nip. A Pit Bull, it's a bite. and that's not entirely fair, okay? Any of these go into that category. So one dog snarling at another may be rude. It may be that they're uncomfortable. It may be just saying, hey, back off. One of the challenges that we have with a lot of dog behavior today is that we raise dogs like we would raise a child in a closet, okay? And then we take them out and we expect them to act appropriately, okay? Or like how you would raise a child and say, oh, well, he has a sibling. He doesn't need any more socialization than that. And then you take the child out when they turn 18 and wonder why they can't function in society. But people raise puppies and give them minimal to no socialization. Well, I have an older lab, so it's fine. So body language between dogs can be really funky. Some dogs are really obnoxious in their flight too. So it takes some learning and context. Yeah. There we have a dog snarling. This is another good example of context, okay? A submissive grin on a dog, sometimes we call it smiling. For some dogs, they do it pretty easily. When we think about it, it's still a submissive grin. So equating it exactly to a human smile isn't entirely fair to the dog, I don't think. When we look at everything else on this dog, though, its eyes are kind of closed and squinty, its ears are pretty darn relaxed, okay? If we look at, even though he's got droopy ears, look up here, all right? That's where you see the base of the ear, there's no tension there. So this dog probably is pretty relaxed. A submissive grin is different than a snarl or a snap, though. So, panting. This is another good example of context, okay? 5-mile walk, 90-degree day, if your dog's not dead, then it's probably panting, right? Okay? It can be a pretty normal, natural behavior for dogs. Panting is also another one, though, I think that people tend to miss. That can be a sign of stress, okay? So it can be a dog saying, hey, things are a bit much, I'm stressed, I'm overly aroused, something is going on like that. It can also come from just excitement, but it's a sign like any of these others, okay? Drooling, I have in with panting because those are probably the closest related. I don't have any good drooling pictures. Some dogs drool an awful lot from stress, okay? So the dog that gets in the car and starts drooling profusely, probably stress related, okay? So in this dog, we could look at him and say, yeah, okay, he's outside, it could be sunny, it could be warm. There's some other stuff going on with this dog that would probably say otherwise, though. We're gonna flip back to him in a minute. So the spatulate tongue is a difference that you can pick up on in some dogs, okay? So what this refers to is when the tongue is out, okay, this is the same dog from picture to picture. It looks pretty different, doesn't it? It's the same dog. So in the picture on the right here, she's got her mouth open, she's relaxed. The tongue is still in her mouth, even out, it could be a little bit different. But that's a pretty relaxed picture. We can see the eyes, the ears, everything else is looking pretty back, okay? Here we've got the ears back. You can see the dilation in her eyes, okay? In this one, she's indoors. In this one, she's outdoors. This one, to me, the eyes almost look more dilated than they do in the outdoor picture, okay? If you look at the shape of her tongue here, so it's a little bit more narrow here and it kind of comes down and starts looping out, that's what's referred to as the spatulate with the tongue, okay? If we flip back to this one, you see it here?
Yes.
Okay? So that's one of the things that tells me that this dog is probably a little more stressed than just panting, okay? When we add in then the ears back, all the things we can see in the face that's more tension than just necessarily a relaxed, droopy, lab-looking face. You can see that spatulate look to the tongue. Okay, so that can be a difference between just panting and I'm warm, and I'm stressed and I'm panting. Does that make sense? Okay? This one has it too. Okay? Not the greatest picture, but it does show that tongue pretty well. Okay? So yawn. Like I mentioned initially, yawns can be from being tired. Yawns can also be a big sign of stress. Okay? They can be conflict, they can be anxiety, it can be a way for a dog to say, hey, things are getting a little bit crazy here, let's just chill things out. But it's probably a sign that the dog is stressed if we're within context for things like that. It can be a really, really big yawn. Sometimes dogs will do little yawns. Stress yawns tend to be a little bit bigger, but it varies from dog to dog. Some dogs will do vocalization with a stress yawn. You may notice that vocalization with a stress yawn is different than with a relaxed yawn. Some dogs will not vocalize when they yawn though. Some will, some won't. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're more stressed or not. Kind of depends on that individual dog. So here's another good big one. And this is one that's can be really obvious. If you're looking for it, a yawn should be a fairly obvious sign. For people that don't know, it goes largely ignored, okay? Nobody's fighting back a yawn right now, are they?
It doesn't mean you're stressed.
I was sore the other day. I just kept yawning over and over again. I hope I'm not just stressed. I think it was something simple, but felt connected to me. All right, so this guy is giving a lot of signs. One of the ones that, I'm gonna call this one a girl, because I keep pegging these all as boys. But one of the ones that she's doing here is what we would consider a lip lick or a tongue flick, okay? These are a nice one if you're trying to go home and go, gosh, how do I take all of this and now look at dogs and pick things out? This is another good one, okay? Lip licks and tongue flicks can be stress, anxiety, conflict, calming signal, if you want to call it that. They can be anywhere from just the teeniest little bit of the tongue flicking out and disappearing again to a pretty big full-fledged lick. It kind of depends on the dog and the situation as to what they'll give. When we look at everything else with this dog, that dog is stressed and that's why that tongue is coming out, okay? If you're standing there holding a piece of chicken, that tongue may also come out, okay? But when you look at it in context with other things, this is another one if you're trying to educate yourself on body language. We talked in the beginning about repetition of cues and the frequency that they're given. If you're trying to look at a dog, let's say you're going to be fostering this dog or something like that and you're evaluating it, this is another one to kind of think of, okay, I've seen 1, now 2, now 3, now 4, now 5 lip licks. That's going to tell you something about what's going on. Make sense? Okay. So here's another one, another example. I have another picture of this dog in just a few frames later that has massive whale eye. Okay. So it can be stressed. They can also go out the side too. It doesn't. Both of those were kind of frontal. It can be off to the side too, though. So here we've got another one of the millions of happy kid and dog pictures. You know, in fairness to this dog, again, this is just a still moment of time. Okay. That dog may be generally pretty good with kids and just be a little stressed out. It could be something else too, but when you start putting things together, probably not enjoying the hug as much as mom and dad think. So, not the greatest picture. Can you guys all see the lip lick there though?
Yeah.
Okay. This is one of the ones that tends to drive owners crazy. because the more angry they get, the more appeasement licking they get in response. So we're generally going to see this directed at another individual. Some dogs will do it in the air. It can be a big one with puppies, right? But we'll see it with adult dogs as well. And it tends to be kind of an appeasement type of a behavior, an accept me kind of a behavior. I want things to go well. I want you to like me. I want to bond with you. Whatever it is. And that's partly why this one is frustrating for owners, is because if your dog is licking out of appeasement and you correct it, it's going to try harder to appease you. Some dogs are really, really just big lickers, and others aren't too. Yeah. Some dogs, I think, also really enjoy the salt in our sweat. So every lick isn't necessarily an appeasement type of a lick. They can also be grooming, right? But you do see a lot of that. All right, so I put this one in here. It's not so much body language, but a lot of what we're talking about is kind of stress or increasing stress or warning signs, things like that. Huff or a sigh is a good one that I often ask owners to look for as a sign that the dog might be trying to calm down. Is calming down. You'll sometimes see it after a stressful event. I was working with some people yesterday, and we were working on dog reactivity. We worked their dog closer up towards the dog park, where everybody was fenced and across the street and at a distance. And the owners asked me, oh, should we get any, let's try a little bit more. And I looked at the dog and a bunch of the signs. I said, no, let's not. And the dog had at this point turned its back on the dog park. Had given me a few other signs. It wasn't losing it. I mean, he hadn't lost it altogether. But I said no. We took 2 steps walking back to the car to pack it in, and that dog went and did the biggest little huff. So that was a sign. Okay, hey, for one thing, we made the right decision. Okay, always better to stop ahead of time than to push it too far, in my opinion. But this dog was de-stressing. Okay. Sometimes you hear it as a big sigh, sometimes it's more of a puff, but that little bit of a, ooh, okay, I'm chilling out now. One of the other reasons to look for that is that it is a sign that things were too much before, okay? If it is that kind of a huff. So it can be kind of an indicator of, gee, okay, well, things were building up. Hopefully now they're calming down. Doesn't mean then we'll go back up again, but it tends to be a sign in that direction. Hair, we've got kind of 3 big ones with hair. One would be piloerection, the other would be shedding or sudden hair loss, and the third would be dander. Piloerection is hackles going up. A lot of people kind of blanketly go, that dog is going to be aggressive. That dog is mean. People look at, they've got that in their head. A dog with their hackles up means that they're aggressive. It can, but it can also just be arousal. They can come up with fear, conflict, uncertainty. You see it a lot, even just in puppy class. If you had a group of similar puppies and another puppy comes in, boom, up come the hackles, and the others are going, what is my dog gonna do? Probably nothing, right? It's just a different puppy. Put it together with some other stuff, and you can probably build on whether is it fear, is it actually aggression, or is the dog figuring out a new environment. This is another one where some dogs do a lot of this. Dogs, you'll never see it. Some dogs you'll see the whole back. Some dogs, like this one, has a little section over the butt and a little section over the withers. Okay, so it can vary from dog to dog. All right. That's probably a little exaggerated. But have any of you guys ever noticed when the dog goes into the vet clinic, or they're standing there and they've just been brought into the shelter or something like that, all of a sudden, you bring the dog back out of the room and everything is covered in hair. It doesn't necessarily mean that the dog is blowing coat. Dogs can start shedding from stress. Okay, So a dog that in the parking lot of the vet clinic was doing just fine, you walk into the vet clinic and you pet your dog and you get a handful of hair, that's a clue, okay? Like I said, not quite as exaggerated as that, but you can notice a pretty extreme difference in some dogs. Other dogs won't do it. So, dander on the face, not as common of a sign, but the picture was so stinking cute. I put it up there anyway. It was either that or just hair with the This is going to be a similar one to shedding. Okay, some dogs can be doing just fine. You bring them into a more stressful environment, and all of a sudden, flaky. Okay, it can then you bring them back out again. You get that brush through and they're fine. Okay, so it's another indicator potentially that they're more stressed than they were before. Okay, so tails. This is another one that some people struggle with a little bit because of breed, and I think we've, by breeding some dogs to have erect tails most of the time, that makes it harder on the dogs sometimes too. So, we may be more likely to see the tail up and over in an Akita than in another breed. So that's some of it. If you look at the positioning of the tail, if you can look from the base of the tail, that can be helpful. Okay, you can sometimes see more of a difference as to whether it's really up and flagged versus is it neutral or is it just kind of out. Sometimes looking at the base of the tail can give you more information. Okay, sometimes it's too hard to see, but sometimes that can help. So movement, variety of things that can go on there. My guess is everybody here would know a wagging tail doesn't 100% equal a happy dog. You've probably run into a stressed dog that was still wagging their tail and didn't go, oh, that's such a great time. But a lot of people still have that impression in their brain. And even if you know it, it may still be kind of back there from what you learned originally, that a wagging tail means the dog is happy. So, tucked or low position. This dog would have a hard time getting that tail more tucked than that. Generally, if we're looking at tucked or in a really low for the dog kind of a position, we're going to be looking at fear. It could be acting more submissively. It's probably uncomfortable, but it can just be more of a, hey, I'm gonna not fight with you. Dog kind of flipped over on their back, tail going under, may just not be wanting to fight, they may not be terrified. And a low tail can also just be relaxed. Okay, for a lot of dogs, tail just low doesn't necessarily mean fear, it could be just relaxed. But there's a pretty big difference between that and this guy. We can also see kind of, if you look, he's kind of got a nice little black spot there. See how low the base of the tail looks there? Okay, that's kind of what I was talking about seeing from the base of the tail, is that we're going way down from there versus being up higher in a more relaxed position. Does that make sense? Okay. There was another picture back more towards the beginning that showed it in the opposite direction, but I don't remember where that was. So high position can be arousal, it can be aggression, it could be play, it could be solicitation. Either just, hey, I want you to pet me, or hey, you're a girl in heat, and I would like to breed you, thank you very much. It could also be the girl going, I'm in heat, and I would like you to come breed me. It could be a lot of different types of things. And then, like I said, in some breeds, it could be completely relaxed and as low as that tail goes. Okay. This guy right here, probably arousal of some level. He's not just standing there with necessarily a naturally high tail. His tail may be up a lot, but the rest of his body, he's definitely interested in something that is over there. So middle position, I would consider this kind of even middle position. You might consider it low, but that's probably a pretty relaxed tail for this dog, okay? Some dogs might have a tail that's in the middle and actually still be fearful, aroused, aggressive. It may just be that they're fearful but they're not terrified and showing it with their tail. It may be that they're aggressive and they're just in between, whatever. I think tail is a good one, like everything else, but take it in context, okay? Especially with all these different breeds that we have. Movement, in general, slower wagging is likely to be more relaxed. It could be calming, it could be a little bit fearful, but it tends to be a little bit more relaxed. Faster can tend to be a little more aroused, okay? It can be playful, it could be soliciting, it could also be aggressive, okay? There are plenty of dogs that have bitten while wagging their tails. Greeting wags, you can see them all. It depends on that personality of that dog. Some dogs wag fast and they get really excited when they're greeting. Some dogs kind of have the whole butt wag. It really varies depending on the dog. If they've kind of been wagging and their tail freezes, like everything else, movement ceasing, look carefully at what's going on, and evaluate, because that can be a danger sign, okay? Whether that tail was up high and wagging and suddenly stops, or even lower and stops. Maybe that they're interested in something. It may also mean that they're getting ready to decide, you're not listening anymore, now I'm gonna make you go away. All right, body posture. This kind of encompasses a lot of things, but this is trying to kind of look more at what the whole body is doing, whether that's because they're leaning forward or backwards or more anything, but we're looking at more whole body stuff rather than just eyes or ears or something like that, okay? We're gonna go through a whole bunch of these. I don't think, other than the last one, I don't think there are any that we're not gonna look at individually. Last one, obviously, mention you again. The dog ceases movement, be very aware, okay? So posture, how they're standing, how they're carrying their body weight. I think one of the best ways to look at it is to kind of visualize a box across the dog's body, okay? So that box could be angled forward. It could be pretty square, or it could be angled backwards. And if you think of that box across the dog's body and then kind of look at the body and go, gee, is it square or is it tipped? That can help you figure that out. The next picture will help you kind of, I think, works well for visualizing that. It can tell you something about the direction that the dog would like to move. So a dog that's angled forward may be wanting to go forward. They may be intending to go forward. Doesn't necessarily mean they want whatever is there, okay? So a dog leaning forward towards another dog doesn't necessarily mean they want to go make friends, but that may be the direction that they're intending on going or the message that they're trying to signal. Same thing with backwards or square. A dog that is going forward then backward, then forward then backward, may be conflicted, or maybe just really, really trying to, okay, you're gonna go away now, up. Could you go away, up. So there are various things that can go on with their body language as to how they're standing. They're not necessarily gonna freeze in one nice little box for you, okay? So if we look at this guy, if you just kind of look at him in general, it's kind of hard to see anything at the position. If you look at him and put a box on it, can you see it tipping forward just the slightest bit? Okay? So that's kind of where I say visualizing that can sometimes help you see where their angulation is. If they're leaning forward, it's not significant with this guy. But there is that little bit of leaning forward, okay? And then we've got fairly tight muscles, we've got a tail that's up, we've got ears that are up. Definitely interested in something, okay? But we've got that little bit of the tilt forward. We can also have the tilt backwards. Height from ground can have things to do with it. So if we look at this, all right, that dog is standing tall. It's a tall, lanky dog anyway, but that dog is standing tall.
He's also ready to go forward.
Possibly, yeah. This one, I think if it could dig itself a hole and be lower than the ground, probably would be. This is a dog in a show, believe it or not. And the judge did examine the dog. I don't know that I would have, really.
Is his tongue out?
Yes, good, good. Tongue is out, tail is tucked. Ears are completely flattened back. So tight muscles are relaxed. This is one I think you see a lot of times through all the various body parts. Anything from the ears to the facial muscles to the body muscles. But the tighter muscles can just be really aroused, and it can be kind of playful. But when you think about a really playful dog, they do tend to, even if they're aroused, be a little bit looser. So it does tend to fall more on the fear. Can be aggression if that's as far as the fear goes. Can be aggression if they're being territorial or have some other stuff going on. You know, if you've got a dog out on a chain protecting its doghouse, you may have really tight muscles, okay? Like I said, the looser body is likely calmer behavior, okay? Kind of a little bit of a collection of signals that tend to be cutoff signals, disengagement cues, or we might call like a no fight cue if the dog's saying, I don't want to play this game anymore, or you're coming too close, or I really don't want to fight with you. Whatever they are, you can see a variety of these things. So turning away, these dogs had been playing and they've taken a break, okay? So we talk about kind of the body position lowering from if you were standing to maybe now you're sitting to maybe now you're lying down. Those can be signs that you're not as interested anymore. These two are both lying down. I would say a golden is really saying, yeah, I'm done, thank you. Okay, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're being aggressive or that they're afraid or anything like that, although it can. But it can just be saying, let's take a break too, okay? Scratching. This is, I think, another one that's good if you're trying to watch for more signals, okay? Some dogs do scratch, some dogs have fleas, some dogs are really itchy. All right, there are plenty of other reasons why a dog can scratch, but if you've been on a walk and everything's going great and your dog is doing fine, and then you get put into a situation, maybe you try to walk across a wobbly bridge and your dog is sitting down and stopping to scratch and stopping to scratch, it's not likely that they got a bad case of fleas right at the beginning of the wobbly bridge, okay? It's probably that they're getting stressed out, okay? So this is one that you can watch for, and it's interesting to see it crop up because a lot of people don't see it until they know to look for it. Another cutoff cue can be sniffing, okay? So these guys are all having a grand old blast in the water. This one. This is, again, kind of like the circus or the boring field. There's a lot going on behind this dog that's probably a little more interesting than the edge of the water. So there's a decent chance that this dog is saying, okay, I need a little break. I don't want to be, maybe the play is too much for that dog. Maybe it's not comfortable with the other dogs. Maybe it is just a break. Or maybe it did find a muscle that's dead and it does smell really good. But it can be a sign of either stress or just needing a break, something like that, okay? So the play bow. Generally speaking, this means what you think it does. There are a few dogs here and there that will drop into a play bow and then kind of disappear and then drop into a play bow that may be a little bit conflicted. They may be kind of trying to keep things happy and good, but I really don't know if I can handle this. For the most part, play bow is fairly universal though, okay? I think this dog is kind of a good example of the looser body even when they're exercising. So this dog is playing, running around. Can you see the difference between tight muscles of running around playing and tight muscles of I'm calm or I'm stressed out? So, you know, in this dog, if this dog were stressed, we'd probably see a lot more pull back in the face. You probably wouldn't see the same kind of just kind of looseness that you see in this one. So this dog is active and doing stuff, but not tight in that same kind of stressed way. So this isn't a great picture, but it is kind of a good illustration of a curved body. Okay. This one, you guys see some other stuff there? Licking. Yep. That's another good one. Yep. This dog, and this one may not have a tail based on the breed, but it could be down the other way.
Or the back end is curved.
Yeah. So it's got a little bit of a slinky look to it. Overall though, it's kind of curved from here right up through, okay? So you can get a circular body where the dog is actually kind of curving themselves and trying to have, it can be just from anything from a polite approach to a little bit cautious, fearful, something along those lines. You can also have an approach that's circular. Okay, and they're both going to fall kind of along the same lines. So it may not be so much that the body is circular, but rather than like, oh, hey, I want to play with you, and so I'm going to march right up to you. It may be more of like, oh, hey, I'm going to come say hi, and I come around in a circle. Okay, either one, they're going to come kind of in the same context. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Yes? Okay. So leaning. Gosh, we think leaning looks so nice and calm and fun, and it can be. It can be soliciting affection. It can be all fluffy, and I'm going to take up 3/4 of the bed somehow. Leaning can be a lot of that. So looking at both context and how they're leaning is important, because leaning can also be this. Okay, there tends to be a difference in tightness from one leg to another. Okay, this dog probably, again, could be one with the fence. It's leaning away for a reason. It's not just standing and trying to get out of the way, it's definitely leaning. Okay, so it can be an escape kind of a behavior, it can be avoidance, anything like that. All right? Gosh, we love the head tilt. It does tend to fall in the category of curious, questioning, listening. This is another one where this can become a learned behavior, where I do this and everybody starts talking to me and paying all this attention to me, and next thing you know, I do this every time someone talks, because everybody loves me when I do this. So it can become a learned behavior as well. I love the response that I get from these crazy humans anytime I tilt my head. So, a paw lift. There can be a lot of different paw lifts. Okay, this one I would say is actually a little bit atypical in that it falls more into the predatory stalking type of behavior, this particular picture. There's the lowering of the head, there's some other stuff. That's why I'd say it's more predatory than
But isn't he leaning away?
There's other stuff on the other side of this.
He's pretty tense looking.
Yeah.
He's getting up.
It does to you? He is to an extent, yeah. Yeah, there's other stuff going on that I know that this dog is more doing a predatory type of behavior. We're gonna look at a couple other pictures as well. The big thing overall to know with a paw lift is that it means action is likely, okay? The paw tends to come up when they're gonna move, okay? It could be my paw comes up and I'm gonna come bite you in the leg. It could be the paw comes up and then we're gonna dash this way in the dog park and it's gonna be a blast, okay? It could be the paw comes up and the bird flushes. But it's an action is likely type of behavior in a dog. So I put in these two. This one on the left, these two are two dogs that I have had in my board and train program. And they were playing, okay? they had stopped, they were sniffing. The poodly one had just peed on the bush, and then they kind of re-engaged, those paws went up, and then they were off again, okay? So that was very much a play, and they were both ready, okay? So it could be a, whoop, here we go. The one on the right here, this is gonna be more of a fear, okay? That paw's up, that dog's next move may be to scuttle down the alley. It may be to climb back up. It could be a variety of things. It could be to come forward, probably not as likely in this little one. But a paw lift in general terms means action is likely, okay? This is another one that can be really obvious if you know to look for it, okay? This can be anything from a quick sniff of, are all my parts there kind of a look, to fully engrossed licking. Now, you can also get licking from grooming, okay? You can get licking that becomes obsessive. You can get a lot of different things. But if in context of other stuff going on, the dog suddenly needs to clean things up, that can be a sign that they're more stressed, okay? Same thing with just the sniff, okay? Some dogs will see something just as simple as just turning in that direction and then they're back, but it's probably a sign of stress, okay? So shake off tends to be another stress relief one. We talked about that huff before. Shake off can be the same way. It can also be used as kind of a calming sign of a, hey, everybody's gonna calm down. These two dogs were just playing, and now they're taking a break, okay? All right, so one of the last things that we're gonna look at here, this is really easy to find. It's out there everywhere on the internet. It's from the British Small Animal Veterinary Association. This is where this particular publication of it is and has originated from. This is a really nice example because it kind of gives us some idea of how things tend to progress. This is not a lay it on every single dog and this is what's going to happen and you're going to see every single sign before they get to the biting. But this is a general guide that can take you up these rungs. So we tend to see things from more of a, hey, I'm a little stressed out, I want things to be calm, everything's okay, all the way up to, you're not getting it, or I'm so freaked out that I need to take immediate action. Okay? Okay? So just kind of general reminder, you know, now that we've been through all of those, that, you know, we're looking at things within context, and we're looking at frequency, all those kinds of things together, okay? So here's kind of that example that I gave you before. He's got the squinty eyes. Anybody want to go pet it? It's probably really sunny, okay? There are a lot of different things, and his paw's up. Who wants to be the end of the action? Okay, I feel bad that I'm showing the pit bull acting that way, but he's also stuck out back on the chain. So look at context. Look at everything as a whole rather than one individual thing. Okay. Here's some of the resources that I talked about. Okay. When it comes to looking at body language, these are some really good ones. Video is really good. Okay, the more video that you can see, the better, I think, for that. Some of the books are great and have lots of wonderful pictures, but there's some limitation to that as well. Okay. And the ASPCA website, they have some good information just on their website. They also do have a webinar that's specific to body language, and it's free. Anybody can go do it.